Welcome to Gun Talk Nation. Another week in the books of gun culture, gun stories, and gun foolery. With me today, Kevin Jarnagin, KJ, and our guest today is a legend, Jeff Puckett.
He's only a legend in his own mind and the state of Oklahoma.
That's right. He's almost as big as Tiger King. Been in the gun industry a long time, been in law enforcement a long time, has an interesting gig these days in law enforcement we're going to hear about. A collector, a hunter, a shooter. So, Jeff, thanks for being here, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I was all giggity when KJ invited me for this deal. And
well, you sit here and you like we're trying to think of folks that have like just stories that like you normally see on TV or
Sure.
like stuff like the Tiger King.
Yeah.
And your name is always at the top of the list. And so it's just we had to have had you on here because it's too good not to. And Jeff and I, a little background on us, we work together at Blue Heron Communications, which is a small PR, but they do big things. And actually, they've got a client with them now that's Sierra Bullets, and a lot of you guys know them. And they are some of the best when it comes to reloading and just bullet manufacturing. These guys are cranking it out. But Jeff kind of leads that whole operation right over there, don't you?
Well, actually, Greg is actually the lead on that. But we know who
leads.
We've been helping each other out quite a bit on that. So yeah, and it's really kind of funny when you talk about bullets, whether it's loaded ammo or components or anything in the gun industry. If we were to walk down the street and ask 10 people the name of a bullet, I bet you Sierra Game King or Match King comes up the majority of the time.
It's in there for sure.
That's kind of the basis for how this all reloading got started, and accuracy, whether it was a hunting or a target bullet, got started with Sierra back 60 years ago, and they still produce those two bullets. The Game King and the Match King are their bread and butter for what they still do.
Well, one of the best quotes I remember hearing about bullets and bullet construction and quality bullets was actually from Jessica Brooks Stevens, which I think both you guys know. Jessica, she's a bullet digger, ballistics geek. Her parents had Barnes bullets, and she liked to say specific to hunting, the bullet delivers your intention to the target. No doubt. Once after you pull the trigger, it's in the bullet's hands. It's doing the work at this point. So you have to have good bullets for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So a little bit of Jeff's background. He's a retired police officer, but he just couldn't stay away from it long enough. And so now what are you doing?
So now I am, my actual title is Deputy Chief of Investigations for the Oklahoma State Board of Dentistry. And then I added on, really kind of funny side story, as I'm also the Director of Education and Training, self-anointed, because I put together some CE classes this year for dentists and hygienists and licensees on opioid abuse, because it's mandated, number one, by our statute now, that all the dentists or anybody that prescribes has to have 2 hours, basically an hour a year. And then we also do an ethics class, which I put together for them. And we talk about
that.
Do what?
You lead that class, the ethics class?
Yeah. But it's more of a case studies. Kind of, this is what gets you in troubles, and is there an ethics violation? Yes, there is. Or, some things are inherently ethical. If somebody cheats you out of something or bills you for work that they didn't use, that's an ethical problem, But if somebody has a substance abuse problem, I don't necessarily know that that's inherently an ethics problem. You know what I mean? Right. It's bad, but it's not necessarily an ethics problem.
You're essentially a dental detective.
Sure. Or as law enforcement would understand this, and probably even the layperson, internal affairs, IA, I'm like internal affairs for the dental profession, because we get about 150 complaints in our office a year on average. And it's by patients for the most part that are not satisfied with their care.
Wow. So, but is it a criminal thing, or is it, they didn't take my insurance?
No, it's more admin stuff. Now we are fully vested police officers in the state of Oklahoma, have full police powers, and we do some criminal stuff, especially if it comes to diverting drugs or We've had some issues of, sex abuse in the past where somebody touches something that they're not supposed to touch or grab. But most of the criminals
do that.
Drug diversion. And we do file charges, a few a year on people that diverted drugs, either script forgery, stolen scripts. We had a hygienist last year that got paid in 2015 by a dentist, like a day labor. And the hygienist kept the check. And then 3 years later, finds the check and then changes the 5 to an 8 and redeposits it electronically. And of course, gets caught.
Yeah.
We look
you can't do that.
We find others. And so, there were charges that were filed on that person.
I bet, it's one of those jobs that I remember we talking about this when you started this thing. We're like, didn't even know that was a job.
Most people don't. I don't know that most people know that they can complain on their dentist, that there's somebody to complain to. I mean, usually if you're unhappy with the service, you just go. But almost all of the boards in Oklahoma have investigators. The medical board does, the DO board does, the chiropractor board does. And now some of them have investigators, but they're not police powers. They're not, don't have any powers of arrest.
So
and
you
then
have those powers.
Do what?
You have those powers?
I do. Yes. Full peace officer. I mean, I have to keep up with my CE training, to my CLEAT certification and requalifications and all that kind of stuff. And then some states have umbrella boards where all of their medical professions will fall under, like the health department. And they'll have a pool of investigators. And one day he may have a case against a doctor. Then the next day it may be somebody against the dentist or a beautician or something like that. Complaint.
Now, being that this is Gun Talk Nation, let's jump into the gun geekery of things. Okay. I mean, I know you're a collector. Smith & Wesson stuff, right? And Casey,
yes.
You know more about than I do, so I'd love to hear more about that.
Why? How'd you get into collecting old Smiths?
And what do you collect?
That's kind of
so
niche.
It's really that's a great question, and believe it or not, I have an answer for it because my dad is a gun guy, and I was a gun guy. I was a gun geek. I would focus my attentions on ARs 1 year, bolt actions. I had a hodgepodge of guns. At one time, I think I had 12 gauge shotguns. And none of them were.
Why do we do that?
Most of them were modern. They weren't, I kind of like that one. Or I needed a new one. I wanted a new one, the whiz bang one that came out, But and my dad though collected, and he still collects pre-64 Model 70 Winchesters. And so he kind of got me. He kind of, you need to focus on something. You've got quite a few Smith & Wesson revolvers. You kind of like those, and start. And that's really kind of how it got started for me. Was he kind of told me to focus your efforts, and instead of doing what I was doing, and that's kind of how it happened. The unfortunate part now about old Smith & Wesson revolvers is I can't afford very many of them.
Yeah.
The secret's out on them.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, the good news is I've got a whole bunch of them that I used to pay $400 and $500 for, which was kind of where I felt that I could, afford. And now those guns are double or triple in value of what I paid for them years and years ago.
Well, I have a question. Do you shoot them?
I shoot some of them, and like any, a lot of gun guys or collectors don't go to the range as often as they can. I have some safe queens, guns that appear to be unfired and new in the box that I won't fire. I actually have, Smith & Wesson introduced the 357 Magnum in 1935, and it was on an in frame. Prior to that, they had a 38-44, which was they would shoot souped up 38 loads on an in frame 44 special gun. And so, but then they introduced the 357 in 1935, and it was on a gun they called the registered Magnum. J. Edgar Hoover got the very first one. And it's in somebody's, I don't know who has it now, but it's my understanding it's in private collection now. But I have one of those, and they had a registration number stamped in it. It went from anywhere from 1 to somewhere around 5,000. I have a 3-digit one. I have a very low number one that letters from the factory is being shipped from April of 1935.
Wow.
And it's a really cool gun, and it's so neat to see that gun that was made in 1935. And it was kind of like the beginning of the Performance Center for Smith & Wesson. That thing is so tuned and is so smooth, and it's really a joy to shoot. It's a shooter grade. I mean, it's not like the collector grade, but it's still that was the one that when I bought that gun, I had every intention of selling it because I thought I could make some money on it. And that gun and my dad's advice was kind of the thing that got me collected. And I still have that gun, and it's worth a lot more than the $1,200 I paid for it in 2004, probably.
Really?
Now,
how do you find that over the years, do you find that the guns that you shoot have a greater depreciation value than like the ones you don't? Like, how much does that play into the cost of the gun, the value of the gun?
I think when you go to buy it, you have to know that if this is a gun that's in unfired condition, if you fire it, you can hurt the value of it, especially if you fire it a lot. Even dry firing, if you get a cylinder ring on it, can change the value of it, right? But it just depends on how you buy it. If it's already been fired a lot, you're probably not going to hurt the value of it when you buy it for it.
Right.
But the problem is some people go, well, I have a shooter grade, model 19 or pre-27, and I want unfired money for it. You know what I mean? And that's just not going to happen.
Well, in the gun world, it's funny how gun collectors, gun shows and that kind of thing, everyone likes to horse trade. There's a lot of,
Sure.
negotiating and some of these negotiations happen over the span of years. You're working a guy for a gun for a while.
Right.
Do you have any stories that come to mind as far as, how I actually acquired this gun, or, you were kind of working on something?
Well, I've got a couple that I acquired that were pretty neat through different hands because it was a family or a friend. But one of them is a Model 60 that there was only 660 of them made for Ashland Distributing back in the 80s. And my dad had a sporting goods hardware store, and he sold that gun brand new to one of his friends, who then traded it to another friend, who then my dad asked him if he still had it. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, well, my son kind of collects those, and I think he'd like to buy it. And so then I ended up with it. And it's a cool, you remember the stainless Model 60s. Well, this one's got a high front blade and adjustable rear sights. There's only, and they're not, again, there's only 660 of them made. And this one, it looks, and both of those guys that had it, I'm friends with, I know their numbers are in my cell phone numbers. I know these guys, and they're older guys. They're in their 70s now. So it's just, that's kind of cool to me, and then, but I don't really have any that I've been, I know somebody has it. Now there's some of those that I know I've got my name on a couple of them when the estate sales happen, and that's kind of neat, but it's also kind of sad because that happens.
Currently, and I'll get you guys' thoughts on this. Currently, I'm trying to work a trade for a Browning A5, 1959.
Ooh, come back.
So it is one of the older.
That's
A5s.
Belgian Browning.
Do what?
Made in Belgium. It's a Belgian then.
Exactly. And so I think I could get it for a pretty dang good price or a straight across trade. So I don't know if it's going to be, I don't know the price isn't on yet. So I haven't checked it yet, but if you guys have what you think the price is going to be, let me know.
Yeah. I'm not an expert on values and prices, but a gun like that, a Browning A5 is just such a legendary gun. And it's just one of those cool guns. And I don't have one in my safe, in my collection. I had one of my best friends growing up. He had a Browning A5. He shot the Humpback. I shot the 870 or the 1100. And, it was kind of like, there's always somebody, I think, in your group that has a Humpback, likes that thing. And then there's people that hate the Humpback. There's kind of strong feelings about that gun,
Well, and it depended on what area of the world you lived in. I grew up in the mountains of Colorado. Shotgunning wasn't a big thing up there. But when you come to Oklahoma, where there was there was birds to hunt, whether it was Midwest and Kansas, Nebraska, that's where people had those kind of shotguns. And that's the thing about those A5s is they made a lot of them. And there's some of them were shorter runs and different. And of course the Belgians are more sought after than anything. And I remember my dad back when his heyday of gun collecting, I think he had one of every caliber or gauge of a new in the box.
Oh wow!
Really?
Yeah, at one time of a Browning belt. Yeah, he had some pretty neat ones. Yeah.
And now Browning's been bringing out the new A5s and kind of updating that whole thing. I think that the latest one is a Sweet 16 A5, which
I think so. Yeah,
it really is sweet. It's very trim. It doesn't seem to be based on a 12 gauge frame. It's kind of a dedicated 16 from what I can tell. I got to shoot a little bit.
They look great, but I don't know. He said he threw out a date. I was like, what year was that gun made? And he said it was 59. I was like, man, that's got to be a true Belgian. Yeah. And so I'm like,
is it in pretty good shape?
Yeah, it was his grandfather's. And I'm like, look, I was like, because he wants to sell it to buy an AR. And I'm like, man, I'll trade you. I'll trade him
I'll trade
an
you straight
AR.
up. Yeah. And that's,
Yeah.
And again, what is it? The definition of a good gun deal is when both sides are happy.
Yeah. Who cares? As long as you're both happy.
Yeah.
Yep. I think on a deal like that, I mean, it was his grandfather's, and I think it means a lot to him. And I cautioned him. I was like, man, one, you need to get rid of it to someone who down the line, if you approach them to buy it back, you still know them.
Yeah, you might be able to, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But on family heirlooms like that, if the kid says, or the guy says, well, look, I've got this shotgun in the closet that I'll never use. I'm not a shotgun guy, or that's not the kind of shotgun I like, but so I'll get rid of it. And I get an AR. And now every time I shoot this AR, which I really, really like, it makes me think of my grandpa. Well, to me, that's a win-win for everybody,
Yeah, I mean, there are those guns, and if you've been into it long enough, I think a lot of people start acquiring guns, and there's probably a few at least that you say, I don't care about this gun. It's not, maybe even you don't dislike it, but it just sits there, and I don't have a use for it. So why not convert that into something that you are going to like and are going to use?
Yeah,
right.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and again, I have some. I mean, my dad's given me a couple that were his dad's. And I won't ever shoot them. I won't ever use them. I won't do anything with them, but I'm going to keep them until I can't keep them anymore. You know what I mean? And they'll be somebody else's problem, but that's just me. And me, I don't know that I would ever, of course I'm a gun guy, so it's a little bit different than a non-gun guy when their family heirloom gun gets passed down. It doesn't really mean anything to him,
Yeah.
But again, if he trades it and he gets something that makes him happy, and then he does think of that's just how I got it. Well, to me, that's good. Yeah. That's a good thing.
But I mean, a fair way to start is looking at Blue Book of Gun Values. That's going to give you an idea and a ballpark, and then you can kind of go from there to go, okay, I think this is probably what it's worth.
Well, I think I've got a gun in my safe that would make it a fair trade.
Yeah, and even there, Ryan, the Blue Book of Gun Values it takes so long to put that together and publish it. It used to be, but now you look on Gunbroker and all those internet sales and see what they're selling for. And look, and yet, granted, you got California prices and New York prices, and these prices versus Midwest prices are always cheaper. But then these people in the Midwest think, well, I can get the California prices for them.
Right.
And get after it.
In everything, asking ain't getting.
Correct.
What you're at? Oh, they're asking this. Well, that doesn't mean they're going to get it. If you think about the guys who go to gun shows, and I think their hobby is not buying and selling guns. Their hobby is going to gun shows. And just putting guns on their table and listing at prices. They really don't want to sell the guns. No. They just want to sit there and talk to people.
You see them year after year, month after, and I used to go to almost every gun show. Gary and I used to go like every Saturday. We'd get up and go. And it finally was like, this is a waste of $14 or $15 every time we walk in the door, because it's the same people. It's the same. And I haven't been to a gun show in probably 2 years, 3 years. Well, no, I went to Wanamaker with Gary and Wagner last year, and that's it.
Yeah. That's the big one.
I mean, Wanamaker, that show is unbelievable.
Yeah. I'm surprised you guys don't come out and set up some kind of deal and do a show from there.
We actually did one episode of Gun Talk Television probably 5 or 6 years ago from there, and it was a to get Joe Wanamaker to let us come in and film in there.
Why?
He would. I think it was kind of more of like, we don't let media into this show, and you had to explain like, well, but we're gun media. We're not like CNN.
Media. Yeah, this is good free press for you.
It's publicity, and that gun show is amazing.
But yeah, it was a fun show that we put together. We still have it. I'm sure we still have that episode.
We do
on YouTube and stuff. But
We usually go to that and then of course it got canceled this year because of the Kung flu. So
yeah. So I figured out. I learned when I was a kid, when I heard about people going into the military or people becoming law enforcement, I thought in the military it just means you get yelled at and get shot at, and I thought that law enforcement just didn't sound like much fun either. But what I learned was those guys have the best stories. You guys deal with people and situations that are, for most people, you think about it, if you have a story where the police had to show up or paramedics had to show up, it's probably one of your like top 10 stories in your life. But if you're a police officer, you're involved in those stories like daily or weekly.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
and he was involved in some just his stories, you could sit down and listen to him for hours.
We started talking before we started recording this and started telling stories already.
Well, one of my favorites is the guy he knew him that still wanted to sell him some weed because he was a narc at one time during his officer years. But give us that story, because that's by far one of my favorite stories.
So again, I worked patrol for 8 years in a uniform, right? In my first 8 years of my career, from 1992 to 2000, basically. And then the summer of 2000, I get selected to go over to what we called the Special Investigative Unit, or SID. And it was plainclothes narcotics or vice or stolen, whatever, but it was mainly narcotics. And you did a lot of undercover work, hand-to-hand buys. And I always tell people, if it's illegal to buy or sell, I've probably bought or sold it undercover, right? And and it was fun. It really was, because I always say you get to do things that everybody else goes to jail for. You know, I mean,
yeah.
And it did. And I told rookie police officers, and when I would teach a class on whatever, I would say, you guys have, you know, to what Ryan was talking about, you have a front row seat to the greatest show on earth, man. You do. And you have to be able to laugh at some of the things that you see, you know, and it kind of gives a twisted sense of humor if it's talking about death or tragedy that you're laughing off, because you still have to be able to cry and talk to your wife. And, but still, you got to be able to make fun of certain situations, you know, and people will look at you and go, what is wrong with you? That's just the way.
Police have gallows humor. Yeah. It's how you cope.
The next story after this one. But so anyway, my wife is a prosecutor, or was a prosecutor at the district attorney's office. And so she did a lot of stuff with child welfare. And through that, before we had our own child, we were actually foster parents, and we helped older teenage kids out to do things. We would chaperone trips, we would do mentoring programs, and through that way we got to know some kids, and then they would age out of the program, and anytime they needed help, if it was money or a meal, they would call us, and not all of those kids ended up successfully. You know, some of them did, some of them didn't. But anyway, we get a call from one of these kids that he was 18 or 19 at the time, maybe 20. He was now working at a Taco Bueno. And he calls and he says, "Hey, Jeff," he says, "I know you're at the police department." And he said, "Somebody came in here looking for another employee and who wasn't here." And then the guy says, "By the way, I've got some really good weed to sell if you want to buy any." And he says, this is how long ago it was, so don't make fun of me, but I got his pager number and put in star 420. And so I'm like, I'm a narc, that's what I do, right? And so me and my partner, I page star 420. And this guy answers, he calls me back, and he says, "Yeah, did you page me star 420? I go, "Yeah, I heard you got some really good green you want to offload." He goes, "Yeah, how much you looking for?" I said, "I don't know, a couple zips." He goes, "Yeah, I got that." I go, "Where do you want to meet?"
He's got the lingo down in everything.
I know. It sounds legit. I don't even know what's happening right now. I'm excited.
He says, "Well, how do I know you?" And I said, "Well, you don't." I said, "But you know my buddy." And I told him his name. I said, you met him at the Taco Bueno yesterday." He goes, "Oh, yeah." And I'm sitting there thinking, this guy's high. You know, he's a stoner. "Oh, yeah." And he goes, "Well, you just want to meet there?" And I said, "Sure, let's just meet there." Okay. And he goes, "Okay, let's meet at noon." And so then I hang up. I'm like, "Shh, this is going to be some stupid high school kid. This is not going to be worth my time." And so I tell, you know, and usually unlike the TV, there is some deep undercover stuff that goes on, but most of the time when you're doing these hand-to-hand buys, you got a cover team, you got a surveillance team, you got a wire on. I tell guys all the time, I'd rather be doing this than pulling over a car at 3 a.m. all by myself out on the east side of the lakes. You know, where there's nobody around, right? I mean, I got a team. My team consisted of 2 people on this particular day. But
so, team.
Wait, who were those 2 people?
Huh?
Was it
No, you wouldn't. A guy named Tom Easley and a guy named Mark Wolf. You didn't know. Mark was at DEA, and I was had just started with the DEA task force.
Okay.
And they have a lot of rules, which I was bending to do these buys. But
he's like Axel Foley.
Yeah. So we go. So Wolfie and Easley are sitting out a car, and our goal was to identify this person. And basically that was going to be see what car he gets into and to get a tag and run it and see, or maybe follow him away and pull him over, you know, 5 minutes later, hey, you ran a red light or your taillight's out or whatever, and get an ID on this guy. And so we walk in and the place is packed. It's lunchtime, right? So, and that Norman has an off-campus thing. And so it's packed. And so I'm looking around, and the guy says, well, I have tan pants on a red shirt. And I'm like, well, I have Stone Cold Steve Austin shirt on. And so,
of course he did.
So Ryan, I had an eyebrow piercing, and I was,
awesome.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. And so I'm looking around, and all of a sudden I see this guy that I've known, that I've dealt with, I don't know, 100 times on patrol. His name is Danny Robb. And I tell you, his mom's name, it's Charlene Gallimahardy was her name. I remember arresting her for a DUI crash one time where she fought the police and almost kicked 3 of our asses, right?
It's a family profession.
Yes, yeah. And so
Sounds like I'm in the Ozarks.
and Danny Robb's waving at me. I'm like, shit, he sees me. And then it dawns on me, he's got a red shirt and tan pants on. So I'm like, well, gig's up. So I go over there and I sat down. I go, hey, man, how's it going? He goes, good, man. Long time no see. I go, no kidding, right? What have you been up to? Oh, little this, little that. And I'm like, he's just going to play this off like he doesn't know what I'm doing here, And
Yeah.
I guess,
do you see my Stone Cold Steve Austin shirt?
And so all of a sudden he's eating a friggin' bean burrito, and he slides this bag of dope across the table for me, and he goes, the beans are really tender this time of the year. And I look in the bag, I'm like, sweet. I'm like, I can't believe this moron is selling me this dope. So I go, so we talk a little bit, and I can't remember how much money it was, a couple $100, whatever it was. So I slide it to him on the table. He goes, anytime, I got the hook up anytime you want. I'm like, well, how much? I mean, are we talking like pounds? Or are we going to stay with ounces or what? And he goes, whatever you want, man. You're my guy. All right.
You're my guy.
So I walk out, I'm shaking my head, and I say into the wire, and I go, don't worry about following this guy. It's Danny Robb. And as soon as I get in the car, Tom Easley calls me. He's like, you're shitting me. I go, no. And he goes, and he sold dope to you? I go, yes.
He knows who you are.
Hey,
I don't know.
He's asking him like, hey, are the guys still out back? Oh yeah. The whole car full of. Do they want some too?
Yeah,
Right, no kidding.
But he must have figured it out, because like we tried, a few days later to get more dope, and he wouldn't answer. So we waited a few months. We put a warrant out for him. We started looking for him. And Danny was actually on a 10-year suspended sentence for some kind of sex assault. I mean, he should have been in prison.
Oh, geez.
But then we go to his house. We're like, hey, where's Danny? We don't know. We think he went to New Mexico to commit suicide. Bye. It was just that.
That's a strange answer.
Yeah,
We're heartbroken.
Yeah. And eventually he gets picked up within a few days. A guy like that, even in the size.
Oh my gosh. That's too good.
Yeah, but it was just, like I said, you had to have fun at that job, a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
And sometimes at other people's expenses, but.
Yeah, the whole the gallows humor part. My father-in-law was a police officer for a number of years, and he's got a few stories where it's like he doesn't tell it in front of his daughters.
Oh yeah.
But when I'm with him, and we'll be like, this one time, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Well,
I bet he has some good ones being an officer in New Orleans.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, KJ knows my daughter very well. She babysit his kids, and she was actually very sad when they moved, not because of the income, but because she liked the kids. And and he knows, KJ knows me, that I'm different around her than I'm around the guys.
Sure.
Oh, 100%.
And even though she grew up in a family of law enforcement, me, and then her mom being a prosecutor and now a judge, that first of all, she can't lie. She's no good at it, as most people aren't. But she would get caught every single time within 2 words. And then we had her buffaloed like on the phone. I said, if you can have a cell phone, but you can't delete this, you can't do this, you can't do that. And she seemed to think that we had like access to it that we didn't have, like we could tell who's, you know what I mean? Like wiretap.
That's the perfect situation for a parent.
Yeah.
They're overestimating you.
Yeah, it worked out because he's like, hey, can I delete emails now? Yeah, we looked at them. You can go ahead. Okay. Because her phone was going up. So she's 20 now. I don't think she believes that. She doesn't ask for permission to delete stuff anymore. So
no, she probably doesn't.
Yeah.
So with your career in law enforcement, on the gun side, what have you seen change over the years?
Well, that's, I got in right at the beginning of semi-automatics. I mean, I started Norman PD September the 11th of 1992. There was one academy before us the year before that got issued semi-automatics. So we were the second group to get issued semi-automatics. So there were still a lot of guys carrying wheel guns back in the 90s, all the way up into the mid-2000s when it became mandatory that you'll have a department-issued semi-automatic pistol. And so that's number one. And then obviously the changeover from shotguns to ARs, and to see there was a lot of the older guys, the same ones that didn't want to go from revolvers to semi-automatics, didn't want to go from a shotgun to an AR.
Why is that?
There was a lot of guys that thought you don't need a rifle. If you can shoot a pistol, you don't need a rifle. If you're accurate with your pistol, you don't need a rifle. Or the whole over penetration and the whole afraid of the political ramifications of what it looks like, the militarization of police.
Yeah.
And they also thought, the shotgun has served us well for a long, long time. And it did. It has. It still has a place. But, to those guys, I'd say, well, look, we used to not have cars or radios, but now we have. We use the best equipment that's available to us. And really, this is because, now that, what is it? ARs at one time were 30% of the market share. And so we have to know that trickles down to the criminals too. And so we got to have at least as good a stuff as what they have, or what we're going to run up against.
Man, you think about, a pistol versus an AR. And I mean, most of them are running ARs with some sort of red dot optic on it, right? I mean, you think about even from like 30 or 40 yards, which, I mean, with a pistol, I mean, for most people, unless you shoot a ton, that's like, I hope I hit him, versus an AR, especially if you find a little rest. I mean, it's like, what part of the head do you want me to shoot? It's no problem.
No, I agree. Yeah, it is. And I'm a better than average pistol shot, but given the chance, I'd much rather have that rifle. The only problem is not always I get out of my car. I mean, I have with me right away, depending on the circumstances, but a lot of times, going into it, what you're going into, from the radio call or from the other officers, and having that thing available was and I know at least Norman, it's been used successfully on some longer shots that ended situations that would have could have ended a lot differently if officers would have had to approach somebody or get closer to them. You know?
Well, and there's a whole lot of law enforcement departments that have to patrol rural areas. Right? I mean, this is not all back alley stuff.
No, especially in Norman, especially in Oklahoma in general. I mean, Norman itself had a square miles of almost 200 square miles.
Wow.
And over 100 of that, or right about half of that, was very rural out around the lake where, again, like I talked about, guys, I'd much rather be buying dope in the middle of the daytime with people listening to me than stopping a car at 3 a.m. out on Highway 9 with nobody within 25 miles of me or 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah, your backup is a long ways away. And especially, I mean, that same goes for game wardens.
Sure.
Oh, man. Game wardens. Yeah, that's something
game wardens, you're when you approach a vehicle, you have to know that those people are armed.
Yeah.
Right. You're talking to hunters. Yeah. Outdoors people.
Yeah.
It's true. Well, Jeff, thanks for being with us, man. This is fun.
No, anytime. This was fun. I do want to tell you one more story too that kind of relates to the humor.
Yeah, absolutely.
My dad, he's 73 years old, and again, a gun guy, right? And so he's got all these guns. And I have an older sister, but she doesn't care about them. And so, and she's got 2 boys. So the most of them will be willed to me, right? And he's got this list, and he always says, "What's your name?" And it's kind of morbid doing that, but you do it. But so a few years ago, he had open heart surgery. And so he was pretty worried about it. He was thinking he wasn't going to come out of this thing very good, Yeah. And so all the families up at the hospital the morning of the surgery, and how many ever hours it is, and the surgery comes out and said, "Look, everything was perfect, textbook," and he's in ICU, and 2 people, and it had to be direct family members at that time could go in there. So my sister and my I call her my common law stepmom, Carolyn, they go in there first. Well, apparently my dad says, "Where's Jeff?" which pissed both of them off. So they come storming out, and you could tell they're mad.
I could see him saying that.
And I'm like, "What happened?" And my sister's like, "He wants to talk to you." And I go, "It's not my fault." Not my fault. I told you to go in there. So I go in there. So here he is laying there. The surgeon's there. The nurse is there. And there's all these machines and wires. And I mean, it looks like a cockpit of an airplane, man.
Yeah.
And he's laying there. He's kind of propped up. And he gives me a thumbs up. And he goes, "I made it." And I kind of looked at him. I said, "Well, shit." I guess I'll call those guys and have them put all that stuff back in your house. And he starts laughing. He goes, oh, and he said, oh, don't make me laugh. And the surgeon looked at me and I said something else, wisecrack. And the surgeon goes, what is wrong with you? And my dad's trying. He goes, no. He goes, he's been a cop 20-some years. And the guy goes, oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, one of those.
Yeah, one of those. Yeah. So even he knew, you know.
That's great. Yeah. Well, we'll have to do this again sometime, man.
We have to do it again because we haven't even gotten into the Jeff and KJ had a radio show in Oklahoma.
That's right. Sooners Outdoors. I tell people that and they're like, really? I go, yeah, we're pretty famous.
SOL.
We're a big deal.
Yeah. And now with all this stuff and all the podcasts, we were kind of on the forefront of that because remember, we would post those, they would record them, and their websites got a lot of hit off of that. Remember? Yeah. I remember we had one guy on the realtor that was selling the land, Jones's kid, and he said he had a 400% increase in his website traffic after that radio show.
See?
The power of radio. There you go.
Yeah. So people
all right. Cool. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, guys. Be safe.
We'll see you.
Anything.
Thanks for listening to Gun Talk Nation. We'll see you next week.